This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Chinese president leads the country in commemorating the 40th anniversary of reform and opening up. DR Congo's electoral body insists on the use of controversial electronic voting machines. And why migration continues to be a divisive issue as the International Migrants' Day is marked. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme, the head of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, to hold bilateral talks with Ghanaian President Akufo-Addo. And Ethiopian artists upbeat following the elevated status of reggae music by UNESCO. Chinese President Xi Jinping, who is also General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, has delivered a speech at the conference commemorating the 40th anniversary of reform and opening up. He reviewed the remarkable progress China has made in the past 40 years and praised the hard work of the Chinese people. Our reporter Zhou Yun has more.
Poverty is not socialism. We must keep abreast of the times. At the start of Xi Jinping's speech, he recalled Comrade Deng Xiaoping's guide for the reform and opening up policy that began 4 decades ago. At the third plenary session of the 11th CPC Central Committee, China has made the decisions to shift the focus onto economic development. That was a historic moment, and massive changes have taken place since then.
After the party's 16th National Congress, Chinese Communists made the overall plan for building socialism with Chinese characteristics, centered around ensuring and improving people's well-being, promoting social fairness and justice. Since the 18th Party Congress, we have introduced more than 1,600 reform initiatives, cracked many hard nuts, and navigated through dangerous currents.
President Xi summarized the progress and achievements made during the 4 decades. He pointed out that China has remained committed to environmental protection and to the great cause of peaceful reunification of the motherland. Xi Jinping said that in the past 40 years, continued efforts have been made to strengthen and improve party leadership.
No tolerance has been shown in the crackdown on corruption. The anti-corruption campaign has delivered a crushing victory. The revolutionary tempering has made our party the backbone of the Chinese people and Chinese nation, always at the forefront of the times.
40 years' experience has become the guide for the future. Xi Jinping called for enriching and growing such assets through further reform and opening up. He adds that a new form of international relations featuring win-win cooperation should be continued.
China would never pursue development at the cost of others' interests, nor will China ever give up its own legitimate rights and interests. China pursues its national defense policy that is defensive in nature, and China's development poses no threat to any other country.
Xi Jinping said that China is now at a point similar to the sailing to the midstream river. As the going gets tough, we must press ahead and there's no turning back.
Turning China into a great modern socialist country and achieving national rejuvenation is like a relay race in which the baton is passed down from generation to generation.
Meanwhile, 100 people were given the title Pioneer of Reform for their outstanding contributions to their lines of work. Also, 10 foreigners from important fields have received the Friendship Awards for their contributions to China's reform. China's reform and opening up in the past 4 decades has left an incredible chapter in history. Moreover, the country's commitment to further open up, as well as the new policies that guidelines map out this time, will enable the country to make new achievements and also make new contributions to the world in the years ahead. So, CGTN reporting from the Great Hall of the People, Beijing.
Well, for 40 years, policies geared towards opening up have been a constant theme of China's diplomacy. So what exactly is China's approach to foreign policy and what impact has it had on the world? CGTN Su Yuting has more.
From shortage to abundance, from poverty to moderate prosperity, the past 40 years have witnessed the tremendous achievements in China's development and the remarkable improvement of people's livelihood. From home-field diplomatic events to international conferences, from policy announcements to practical measures, China continues to send a clear signal it is throwing its door wide open to the world.
It
is an important decision made by China to pursue a new round of high-standard opening up. It's also China's major initiative to still widen its market for the rest of the world. It demonstrates China's consistent position of supporting the multilateral trading system and promoting free trade. It's a concrete action taken by China to advance an open world economy and support economic globalization.
President Xi Jinping has proposed a lot of important proposals during his remarks, his speeches, on the platform of the Boao Asia Forum, this kind of situation. President Xi believes that reform and opening up is a very important principle, not only for China, but for the other countries in the region and all over the world.
China has maintained frequent exchanges with leaders from the US, Russia, India and other countries across the world, as it holds that all countries, no matter big or small, rich or poor, strong or weak, are equal members of the international community. China has joined the rest of the international community to continue its support of the UN, the G20, the SCO, APEC and BRICS in playing a bigger role, advancing the process towards multilateralism and improving the global governance system. Experts say over the past 40 years, China has maintained consistency in its foreign policy, sticking to the principles of non-interference, mutual respect and peaceful development.
In the past 40 years, China has been trying to find a way for its own development as well as to fit its role in the region and in the world. So China's diplomacy reflects that with the increasing strength and increasing capacity, China would like to be kind of positive factor not only to its own people, to domestic affairs, but also to the regional integration and to the globalization.
China has taken actions for the opening up of a new stage of Chinese diplomacy, building a new type of international relations and a community with a shared future for mankind. Just as what President Xi Jinping has emphasized that China will always be the builder of world peace and contributor to global development and defender of international order. Su Yuting, CGTN, Beijing.
The third Understanding China conference is currently underway in Beijing. It's an example of China's opening up, which begins with dialogue. Participants from across the globe are gathering to discuss China's new growth drivers and new opportunities for global communication and cooperation. More now from CGTN's Zheng Yibing.
Forging a deeper understanding between China and the rest of the world. International guests at the third Understanding China conference in Beijing praised the strides the nation has made over the last 40 years.
There are 100 miracles, okay? But the one that I am most impressed by is China's success in essentially eliminating extreme poverty. So in 1978, 90% of all Chinese were trying to survive barely on less than $2 a day. Today, that number is only 1%.
Experts hail that as an accomplishment for China and for the whole world, with some hoping for more and deeper links with China.
I think we need to work more with the subnational levels, with government, to be able to build that level of understanding.
This year's conference coincides with the 40th anniversary of diplomatic ties between the People's Republic of China and the U.S. And amid the current China-U.S. trade tensions, all participants expressed concern, hoping that everything can soon get back on track.
So sometimes a crisis forces a dialogue, and it seems that it has in this case. For the next 90 days, I think until March 1st, there's going to be much discussion and much negotiation and much dialogue. So maybe that's an opportunity for things to get better.
The right approach is let's sit around the table. That's what the Europeans are trying to do. Discuss how the rules of WTO can be modernized, updated.
Some say all nations should pursue deeper cooperation instead of confrontation.
And it is in recognition of this interdependent, integrated, interconnected world based on global supply chains that this idea about the community of interest and a community of shared future should be developed.
The third Understanding China conference builds on the goals of the first two, and it shows China's wishes for the future. The conference hopes to convey a message to the world that China remains committed to reform and opening up, and will stay firmly on the path of peaceful development and win-win cooperation. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, CGTN recently completed an epic journey across China, tracking change and transformation over the past 40 years, from Beijing in the north to Shenzhen in the south. Well, Lindy Mtongana was part of that team and joins us now live from Shenzhen. Lindy, tell us about your journey through China and what it entailed.
Well, Karen, perhaps it's best to just summarize it in numbers. It was a team of 70 reporters, anchors and television crew that traveled for 10 days, as you mentioned, from Beijing to Shenzhen. Now, in total, we covered about 4,000 kilometers, visiting 40 cities along the way and doing about 100 live crossings. And just my part of that was about 9 cities that I visited. Certainly one of my highlights was being at, witnessing just the history of Kung Fu at the Shaolin Temple. We arrived one morning, it was about -5 degrees, and there were 8,000 students of Kung Fu starting their early morning training. The youngest couldn't have been over 5 years old, and there they were performing these intricate and well choreographed moves for a particular type of martial art that dates back 400 years. It's been a very eye-opening journey.
Well, great. That sounds interesting, the Shaolin Temple and all those Kung Fu moves. But during this journey, what struck you about China's transformation?
Well, I think, that for me, I was struck by it in 2 ways. The first, I would say that China definitely has a very proud connection with its past. So everywhere we went, we saw, something like the Yellow Crane Tower. That dates back to the year 200 AD. And just history all along the way, and often reflected in architecture, in music, in food, in cultural traditions. So in as much as there's been so much change, there's certain things in China that remain constant. And of course, the key thing that is a big takeaway for me is just witnessing the level of poverty alleviation. I heard stories along the way of how families 40 years ago not only shared a house, but 3 generations would live in one room together in a 3-story bunk bed with the grandparents on the bottom, the parents in the middle, and the children on the top. But throughout this journey across the way, I just saw that evidence of poverty alleviation. 800 million people lifted out of poverty in 4 decades. It is definitely one of the most significant economic development achievements of the 20th century.
And Lindy, tell us about where you are now in Shenzhen and this city's significance in relation to opening up and reform.
Well, in fact, opening up and reform started right here in Shenzhen. It was the site of China's first ever economic development zone. And, that was 40 years ago, back in 1978, when this was nothing but a fishing village with 300,000 people. The strategy, of course, that China employed was to start building factories and get people to work in the manufacturing sector.
Okay, well, apologies there. It looks like we've lost Lindy Mtongana there. She was tracking change and transformation over the past 40 years from Beijing in the north to Shenzhen, where we were interviewing her. Moving on to other news now, but sticking with China, China continues to be a major pillar of economic support for many African countries. The expectation is that the reforms in the opening up policies of China will trigger more prosperity for the continent. In West Africa, trade relations between China and Nigeria have blossomed over the past decade. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with more.
Nigeria's computer village. is the largest ICT accessories market in West Africa. And if there's one place to measure the impact of trade relations between Nigeria and China, it's here. Over 90% of the items sold in this market come from China. Most of the Nigerian businessmen operating here often travel to China to buy the goods sold in the market. Ziggy is one of them and says business relations with his Chinese counterparts have deepened greatly over the years.
The moment both parties are engaged in a honest performance, you know, I give what I promised, and he supplies what he promised. It works well, and it has really increased our productivity here. It has really increased our selling output.
Early this year, Nigeria entered into a $2.5 billion bilateral currency swap deal with the People's Bank of China to facilitate business transactions between Nigerian and Chinese businessmen without having to resort to a third currency like the dollar to do business. Ziggy says the deal is the best thing that has happened to businesses like his, importing heavily from China.
Before now, you go through the hurdles of changing your dollar brought in from Nigeria here, but now it's not the same again, you know. And another easy way of doing it is the value is no longer based on dollar exchange rate. So the yuan has its own value to the naira. It makes it a lot easier. And that's why these days you might not even have many people traveling to China, because that arrangement is a win-win thing. I could be at the comfort of my house or a counter room office and make a call to my supplier there. You know, the moment he confirms the money paid here in naira value, you know, at their own exchange, it's done. Once both parties understand themselves and they trust each other, it works well.
The horizon looks bright for relations between Nigerian and Chinese businesses, but there is a concern here over the imbalance in the bilateral trade between both countries, which is obviously skewed in favor of China. I mean, there are more Chinese products coming in here than there are Nigerian products going the other way. But then the last China International Import Expo was designed to address some of those concerns. So it's up to Nigerian businesses to take advantage of the opportunities offered by that event to increase their exports to China. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, we're going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including DR Congo's electoral body insists on the use of controversial electronic voting machines. And why migration continues to be a divisive issue as International Migrants' Day is marked.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's now get you an update on the upcoming presidential poll in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The country's Independent National Electoral Commission has been setting up electronic voting machines. The use of this equipment has been rejected by opposition candidates who claim they could be used to manipulate the election. Thousands of such voting machines recently went up in flames in the capital, Kinshasa, fueling further speculation about the credibility of the planned vote.
DRC's electoral body Seni believes the voting machines will facilitate, speed up and give reliable and truthful results in the long-delayed presidential election now set for December the 23rd.
What does this machine offer? I can sum up the machine in 4 words. Facility, meaning the machine facilitates the vote. Reliability, because after the vote, the machine will give us 2 sources of results, even if the results that will determine the winner will be counted manually. Speed, because the period separating the announcement of the result will be shortened, thanks to the fact that the ballot is no longer a larger ballot, but small ballots that will be separated easily.
Last week's blaze at a Senate depot destroyed 8,000 of the 10,368 voting machines due to be used in the capital Kinshasa. Senate did not say who it believed to be responsible for the fire, but said the election would go ahead as scheduled.
This machine has arrived to eliminate any attempt of cheating that we may have had in 2011 and 2006. The machine has arrived to correct this.
But the opposition claim the machines are more vulnerable to vote rigging than paper and ink, and could be compromised by the unreliability of DR Congo's power supply. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
French President Emmanuel Macron has promised to inject nearly $57 million more towards the G5 Sahel alliance. The French president made the pledge after meeting his Burkina Faso counterpart, Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, at the Élysée Palace. The G5 Sahel alliance, which comprises 5 West African countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, Chad, Niger and Mauritania, is focused on mitigating organised crime and reducing the terrorism threat in the region. According to Kabore, jihadist activity in the Sahel has increased, resulting in the closing down of over 600 schools. The two also signed agreements pledging financial assistance that will help with electrification of train lines in the Sahel region, spur investments in professional integration and rural electrification, as well as water treatment.
In keeping with the Sahel emergency plan put in place by the government of Burkina Faso, the French Development Agency will invest nearly 50 million euros in additional funding to the region in 2019 in the areas of professional integration, electrification of rural areas, and in water purification.
What we wanted to state was that the set of counter-terrorism measures are really urgent, because today we have almost 600 schools which were closed between the east, the Sahel, and the north of Burkina Faso. These are large figures and demands that we can coordinate our cooperations between countries, between Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso, and be able to reduce the circulation of these people between our borders.
The government of South Sudan says a US cut in aid to the country would worsen the current humanitarian situation. This after Washington announced it will stop providing aid to Juba in an attempt to end violence and corruption in the country. CGTN's Patrick Oyet now reports.
Juba argues U.S. donations continue to help the most vulnerable South Sudanese people, and that a reduction to that aid would have negative effects on the population. South Sudan's Foreign Affairs Ministry says the sanctions are unjustified actions by the U.S. The government stance is that there is no need for the U.S. to cut assistance to South Sudan at a time when the former warring parties are fully committed to implementing the latest peace deal, which was signed off in September. President Kiir's government promises to continue engaging with Washington on a bilateral level to try and iron out any differences amicably.
The government of the Republic of South Sudan would like to register its concern and protest in the strongest terms against these unjustified unilateral sanctions, and on the other USAS statements designed to undermine the implementation of the peace agreement in South Sudan.
The U.S. is South Sudan's largest donor. In March this year, it earmarked $184 million for humanitarian aid to the country. But for that donation to take place, there are certain expectations. The U.S. says countries that receive their assistance must invest in health and education. It also believes aid should be used to encourage accountable and transparent governance and promote the rule of law, which is why Washington now says it will not provide this support as long as it believes the assistance would help prolong violence in the country. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
This Tuesday marks International Migrants' Day. It's a date set aside to highlight the plight of those who risk it all for the chance of a better life away from home. But in Europe, migration has been a divisive issue since the height of the crisis in 2015. Mariam Zaidi reports now from Brussels.
Austria will end its 6-month presidency of the European Council with fanfare by hosting the EU-Africa Forum from Tuesday in Vienna. Migration has dominated the bloc's relationship with Africa in recent years. But in the last year, the EU has moved away from seeing itself as an aid donor to wanting real partnership with Africa and in the future, a trade deal. And the theme of this two-day meeting is to push forward with digital cooperation. The who's who are invited along with African heads of state. But some EU leaders are boycotting the meeting after Austria refused to sign up to a UN migration pact last week, which reaffirms human rights of refugees and migrants. But here in Belgium, the international agreement also caused problems for the government. The Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel was forced to reshuffle his government to prevent it from imminent collapse a week Sunday. After his fire at coalition partners, the New Flemish Alliance quit government in protest over the non-binding international agreement. And the right-wing party didn't stop there. Just here in the EU heartland on Sunday, in the streets behind me, police used water cannon and tear gas to break up angry protests by over 5,000 supporters of the NVA party. And this week, Michel could now face a vote of no confidence if he's unable to find new allies, or he'll have to bow to Flemish nationals' demands to water down the UN compact. So with Europe so fractured on migration, you have to wonder what real results can come from this two-day meeting in Vienna. Mariam Zaidi, CGTN, Brussels.
Meanwhile, Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi discussed cross-Mediterranean migration on Monday in Vienna. Kurz, who holds the 6-month rotating EU presidency until the end of the year, has pressed for stronger cooperation with northern African nations to help stop migrant crossings. In a joint news conference, Kurz praised Egypt's efforts to prevent boats from leaving and said that the number of arrivals in Italy has dropped to none in recent weeks. The leaders stressed that the most important aspect of preventing illegal crossing attempts is to stop the number of drownings. Nearly 5,000 migrants died in 2016 while trying to cross the Mediterranean from Africa and the Middle East.
In the entire Mediterranean area, it is very important that all countries which are suffering from instability and problems, that all those countries are led to the path of security, because stability and security in Europe is naturally a topic when we talk about illegal migration. It is obviously an element of influence on stability. The Egyptian government managed to protect the northern coast and makes sure that not a single boat with refugees leaves its coast.
Egypt is now making sure that people cannot illegally leave Egypt towards Europe. In recent weeks, we have had no new arrivals in Italy, and that doesn't only mean that we are bringing increasing order in Europe, but also that with that, the foundation for the smugglers is being destroyed. And most importantly, that the drowning in the Mediterranean ends.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi recently inaugurated several water desalination and water recycling projects. Egypt has been rushing to build these projects amid fears that its water shortage could soon turn into a crisis. Here's Adel El-Mahrouhi with more.
Egyptians' water share is almost half that specified by the UN for water security. The country currently consumes over 70 billion cubic meters of water annually. By the year 2040, that volume is expected to reach 140 billion cubic meters. That's more than double Egypt's current share of the Nile's water.
If we do not find alternative sources of water soon, we will have a crisis. The state has adopted a plan to increase dependency on desalination as a source for drinking water.
Egypt is racing time to expand its water desalination stations. The government says it will spend $50 billion by 2037 on water projects in coastal governorships to decrease their dependency on the Nile's water.
We are moving on 3 main concepts: water recycling, desalination, and harvesting of rainwater. Egypt produces 200 million cubic meters of water in a day. Within 3 years, we want to reach 900 million in a day. The state's policy now is to make all coastal governorship rely mainly on desalinated water and renewable water.
Matruh governorship on the Mediterranean is the country's success story. Back in 2011, the armed forces would send trains of water to supply the city with just 600 cubic meters. Nowadays, this city's desalination projects produce 80,000 cubic meters daily.
The cost of desalination remains high. 1 cubic meter costs $1,200. With that price, the country can never rely on it or make it a primary source of water. We're expanding our recycling projects, especially from agriculture and industrial waters, to diversify.
To cut costs, the government is currently studying a proposal to use advanced techniques of agriculture without soil. When irrigated with desalinated water, the revenues are quite lucrative. That income could then be used to decrease the cost of desalinated water for citizens. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
A recap of our top stories now. Chinese President Xi Jinping, who is also General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, has delivered a speech at the conference commemorating the 40th anniversary of reform and opening up. He reviewed the remarkable progress China has made in the past 40 years and praised the hard work of the Chinese people. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Independent National Electoral Commission has been setting up electronic voting machines. The use of this equipment has been rejected by opposition candidates who claim they could be used to manipulate the election. Thousands of such voting machines recently went up in flames in the capital, Kinshasa, fueling further speculation about the credibility of the planned vote. This Tuesday marks International Migrants' Day, a day set aside to highlight the plight of those who risk it all for the chance of a better life away from home. But in Europe, migration has been a divisive issue since the height of the crisis in 2015. Austria is ending its 6-month presidency of the European Council by hosting the EU-Africa Forum in Vienna. Migration has dominated the bloc's relationship with Africa in recent years. And French President Emmanuel Macron has promised to inject nearly $57 million more towards the G5 Sahel alliance. The French president made the pledge after meeting his Burkina Faso counterpart, Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, at the Élysée Palace. The G5 Sahel alliance, which comprises 5 West African countries, is focused on mitigating organised crime and reducing the terrorism threat in the region. And those are your top stories. Well, we're going to a short break now. Don't go away. All the business news coming up, including the head of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, to hold bilateral talks with Ghanaian President Akufo-Addo.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
The head of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, is in Ghana for a 2-day visit. In Accra, Lagarde will be holding bilateral talks with President Akufo-Addo as the country's $918 million program with the IMF draws to an end this December. Lagarde has opened a regional conference on the future of work in sub-Saharan Africa, discussing the challenges and the opportunities in creating jobs in the region. This is the first leg of an Africa tour that will see her visit South Africa and Angola too. Ocha Okoronkwa is in Accra with the latest.
IMF head Christine Lagarde kicked off her trip to Ghana right here at the Future of Work conference, talking technology as well as jobs in the sub-Saharan African region. Now, the aim of the conference was to tackle the challenges that the fourth industrial revolution poses, of course, as technology and climate change dramatically transform key sectors of the economy, and as population numbers are expected to rise from 1 billion today to 1.7 billion by 2040. Now, the question Christine Lagarde posed is, how will African governments make the right policy decisions needed to create the 20 million jobs that will support the growing labor force in the sub-Saharan African region in a changing world today?
So let me highlight two of these policy areas which I believe will be critically important. One is education, the other one is digital connectivity. In the Africa Arisen scenario, the region succeeds in harnessing the benefits of new technologies. But to get there, what will be needed is a well-trained labor force with the right skill set. Now, despite successes in primary education, and here the Millennium Development Goals were critically important to set our eyes on what was needed, and he was so instrumental in that respect. But still, sub-Saharan Africa lags behind in secondary education. The share of children in the region who attend secondary school is just 30%, and that is the lowest in the regions of the world. And simply increasing enrollment is unlikely to be enough. We need to promote digital literacy and identify the skills that will allow the next generation to work and take advantage of technology rather than be replaced by it. And that's really the dilemma.
Allow them to enhance. Now, the IMF says, of course, it will play a role in providing the critical financing and technical assistance, which, of course, will be needed to develop the physical, digital and social infrastructures as we go forward. Christine Lagarde also says that IMF research shows that there is a potential to raise 3 to 5% of GDP in domestic revenues by improving tax systems and infrastructural reforms. She'll be discussing this further with key government officials and members of the private sector on Tuesday. Uche Okoronkwo, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Zimbabwe's inflation has soared to a fresh 10-year high. The cost of living in the country rose to 31.01% year-on-year in November, from 20.85% in October. This was caused by a spike in prices of basic goods amid an acute shortage of dollars that has made imports expensive. On a monthly basis, prices increased by 9.2% in November, compared to 16.44% in October. The Zimbabwean dollar, known as Zola, has lost value against the US dollar. According to analysts, this is because there are more Zolas in banks than actual US cash dollars available. Central bank data shows that some $10 billion were being held as electronic dollars in bank accounts, but less than $250 million in cash dollars. Saffron farmers in southern Morocco have long taken pride in the coveted spice they produce from the purple-petaled crocus, the sativus. But some are worried inferior versions are threatening their business. Here's CGTN's Terry Wangari with more.
Saffron farming in southern Morocco has remained largely unchanged for centuries. The flower requires drastic climate conditions, hot summers and cold, wet winters, and can only be harvested during a month-long window from mid-October to mid-November. The purple blooms are picked before they fully open to ensure quality. Once dried and sorted, the flower's crimson stigmas and styles are turned into saffron, the world's most expensive spice, popular with top chefs across the globe.
Here we are sure it's real saffron. In Belgium, we are not really sure.
For me, it's very special because I have only seen saffron in food packets, but not with the flowers like here in the fields. It's very special for me. The spice is both a source of pride and a lifeline in this part of Morocco, which, along with a neighboring town, produces 90% of the kingdom's saffron. Some 1,500 families depend on sales from the crop to survive. But the rise of counterfeit saffron is tarnishing the country's reputation and its designation of origin label, or PDO, which guarantees a product's origin and uniqueness.
Saffron specialists came here to do some tests and they told us that our saffron is first class. In other regions, the saffron is second or third rate.
In the production stage, there are very strict conditions for the saffron cooperatives to get the label of protected designation of origin for Touluan saffron.
Saffron's rarity and its painstaking cultivation help explain its price. It takes nearly a kilogram of flowers to create 12 grams of the spice. In Morocco, PDO certified saffron sells for about $3.50 a gram. Counterfeit saffron, however, can sell for less than $1 a gram.
The counterfeiting that affects saffron is a recurrent problem, which does only affect farmers in the cooperatives, but it mainly affects the people who sell saffron in the souks, as the Sunday market of Agadir, and in Casablanca, where saffron is sold in plastic bags or envelopes.
Morocco is the world's fourth largest producer of saffron behind Iran, India and Greece, according to the figures published in 2013. The government is now working with cooperatives and local farmers to ban counterfeit saffron and protect the rare coveted spice. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
In Ghana, craftsmen traditionally look to the Christmas season as a time of bumper sales for their handmade cane and bamboo baskets. Customers often buy the baskets to make hampers as gifts. However, this year the basket weavers say a downturn in the economy has translated to a downturn in sales. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports now from Accra.
Craftsmen here produce various forms of artworks using locally grown materials like cane and bamboo. Kwejo Adumako has worked here for over 20 years, weaving baskets and other items. Traditionally, the Christmas season is a time for him to increase production. But he says he won't do so this year for fear he won't get enough customers to buy the baskets. In 2013, a government directive led to a ban on the giving of seasonal hampers by officials, something Kwejo believes has continued to hurt businesses.
Our major customers during the Christmas period were government institutions and ministries. But after a directive some years ago that government institutions should stop giving hampers to associates during Christmas, the business slumped.
The government's ban on Christmas hampers were part of efforts to check corruption in the public sector. Despite the slow pace of business for the craftsmen recently, this has not put off young people who are still keen to learn the trade.
I like this job because when you are focused, you can earn a decent income to take care of yourself and relatives.
For many young people here, basket weaving is their main occupation. The average daily income in the past was $100. But now they are not even able to make $50 a day.
As Christmas nears, many of the craftsmen like Kwejo keep themselves busy and continue to hope for the best. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
We're going to a short break now. Don't go away, lots more to come, including Ethiopian artists upbeat following the elevated status of reggae music by UNESCO.
When you look at Africa, what do you really see? Do you see fast-growing, endless deserts and parched earth? Or do you see the biggest opportunity for an agricultural revolution in a generation? Do you see crowded, unplanned cities or vast, untapped markets? Do you see a population at risk, or do you see a billion-strong opportunity to grow the next wave of multi-billion-dollar firms in Africa? When you look at Africa, what do you really see? Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
On to Madagascar now. The country heads to the polls on Wednesday for its presidential runoff. The choice is between two former presidents, both convinced that they'll win. Millions are due to vote. CGTN's Penina Karebe has this update.
First-round voting went peacefully enough, and voters are hoping the runoff also will be trouble-free. The field has been cut to two, both men well-known, well beyond Madagascar's island coastline. Marc Ravalomanana ruled until 2009, when he was overthrown. Andry Rajoelina is the man who overthrew him and took charge until 2014. Rajoelina was just ahead in the first round. Both men are confident they will win the runoff. Campaigning has been intense. There are 10 million registered voters. For most, poverty is the key concern and food security.
It's been at least 4 years now since we last had a satisfying rate of rain. Consequently, since the local economy is based on agriculture and breeding, people have adopted a strategy. A little shock would drive them to be in a crisis situation.
Almost half of the island's children under 5 are chronically malnourished.
I hope the next president will be more aware about our situation. We suffer from hunger and we need more food aid.
44-year-old Rajoelina says Madagascar needs a young leader. 69-year-old Ravalomanana says it needs his expertise. What Madagascar really needs is an economic miracle. It's ranked by the World Bank as one of the world's poorest nations. Penina Karebe, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
UNESCO has just declared reggae music to be on their list of international cultural treasures, much to the delight of fans and artists who say it was long overdue. The UN arm has recognised the music genre for its ability to address politics and social issues as well as love and everyday life. CGTN's Coletta Wanjoe caught up with some reggae artists in Addis Ababa.
It is rehearsal time for the Zion Rebels music group ahead of their reggae concert on the 21st December in Addis Ababa. Their next performance now comes as reggae music has been recognized by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage.
It's good that UNESCO announced it, you know. Like we can say that they're a little bit late, but we have recognized reggae music for a very long time for us, you know. We've been making reggae music, we'll be making reggae music. We believe that reggae music will live on.
The group has been performing for 15 years and believes there will be direct benefits to the UNESCO label. Some hope the birthplace of reggae, Jamaica, is likely to see an increase in tourism as a result.
I don't think it's going to change things, you know, for reggae music. But for Jamaica, once again, true, since the music is born there, it might have a big thing there. But for the world, you know, reggae music will keep on being listening, you know.
In Ethiopia, like many parts of the world, reggae is associated with Rastafarianism, a spiritual movement born in Jamaica in the 1930s. This decision by UNESCO has been highly appreciated by Ethiopia because there is a big Rastafarian community that lives here. There are many Rastafarians from different parts of the world that have settled in Ethiopia because they believe this is their home, their promised land. One such person is Ebony J from the United Kingdom, who moved to Ethiopia 18 years ago.
To be, you know, acknowledged officially, knowing that we have something to declare and claim as our own, and to let the next generation know this is for you, you know, and if you've got anything conscious and whatever, you got your reggae music, it's always going to be recognised and be kept protected now, you know, so I really think it's an amazing thing.
In addition to the protections given by UNESCO, these artists say they will also keep the music alive by constantly producing new, fresh work. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
All the sport coming up after the break, including Egyptian side Al Ahly appoint former Real Sociedad manager Martin Lessart as new head coach.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.